I don't know what you've been told about opportunities, but let me tell you something most people never admit. The real ones don't arrive loudly. They don't come with applause. They don't come with certainty. They come quietly, like a decision you don't realize will change your entire emotional architecture until it's already inside you. And right now, I'm speaking to you like I would speak to someone I cannot afford to lose. Because this isn't business. This isn't timing. This is something far more fragile. This is love disguised as an opportunity. And I want you to understand the weight of what I'm saying before you decide to stay or leave this moment. If you leave early, you won't just miss words. You'll miss the version of me that only exists when I stop pretending I'm in control. I don't usually speak like this. I built things, systems, teams, futures. But none of that protects you from what happens when one person starts occupying too much space in your silence. That's what you've done to me. And I don't even know when it started. Maybe it was the way you listened without trying to fix me. Maybe it was the way you didn't compete with my thoughts, you just stayed with them. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to perform intelligence just to be understood. But here is where it becomes dangerous. Because when something feels this natural, you stop questioning whether it's safe. And I should be questioning it. I should be cautious. I should be distant. But instead, I find myself here, offering you something I haven't offered anyone in a very long time. An opening, an opportunity, not to work with me, not to follow anything, but to step into something that will demand honesty from both of us in ways neither of us can undo later. Tell me something. When was the last time someone didn't just want you around, but actually considered what it would mean to lose you? Because I've been thinking about that. Not casually, not in passing, but in the kind of silence that interrupts sleep. And I keep arriving at the same uncomfortable truth. I don't want a version of connection that can be switched off when it gets inconvenient. I want the kind that forces clarity, even if clarity is painful, even if it changes everything. But I need you to hear this carefully. This is not a promise of ease. This is not a promise of safety. And if you are looking for something simple, you should step away now. Because what I am offering you doesn't behave like simplicity. It behaves like consequence. And yet I still find myself asking, why you? Why your presence feels like it arrived with unfinished instructions in my life? Why do I feel like I've already met you somewhere deeper than memory? Don't answer that yet, just sit with it. Because answers too early ruin things that are still becoming real. Now I want to tell you something I haven't told anyone. Not because I was hiding it from the world, but because I was hiding it from myself. I've built my life on control, on understanding systems before they collapse, on predicting outcomes before they surprise me. But you don't fit prediction, and that unsettles me more than I can explain. Because there is a difference between meeting someone you admire and meeting someone who changes the way you interpret silence. And I've been avoiding admitting that difference. Not anymore. Before we go further, I need to ask you something that may feel too direct. When someone finally sees you clearly, do you stay? Or do you start preparing your exit before they can change their mind? Don't rush your answer in your head. Let it expose you a little, because I think that's what this is. Exposure, not of weakness, but of truth. And truth, when it arrives between two people, doesn't ask permission. It rearranges everything. And I am offering you an opportunity, not to be chosen, not to choose me, but to see what happens when neither of us runs from what we feel when we stop performing who we are. But here's the part I should probably not say this early, yet I will, because I don't want to lose you in a version of me that is incomplete. I haven't told you the real reason yet, not the surface reason, not the acceptable reason, the real one. And when I do, it won't make things easier, it will make them heavier. Still, I'm here, still offering you this, still not walking away from the possibility that this changes everything I thought I was protecting. Tell me, if you felt something shift in you while listening to this, would you trust it? Or would you call it temporary? Because I need to know whether I'm speaking to someone who runs from intensity, or someone who finally understands what it means when intensity stops being chaos and starts becoming direction. And I'm not going to lie to you. The closer I get to you in thought, the more I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something I cannot reverse. Not because I lack control, but because I might not want it anymore, and that is the most dangerous part of all. I'll stop here before I say something that cannot be undone too soon. But I need you to decide something, even if only in your silence. I need you to understand something before you decide what this is. This is not a message. This is not content, and it is definitely not an offer in the way people usually understand offers. Because what I am about to say carries a cost that doesn't show up immediately, but always arrives later. And once it arrives, it doesn't ask permission to change your life. It just does. So before you continue listening, I want you to ask yourself one thing honestly. Do you want something real, or do you want something safe? Because I cannot give you both. And I don't say that to impress you. I say it because I've learned something most people avoid learning until it's too late. Everything meaningful in life begins with discomfort, and everything comfortable eventually becomes forgettable. I've built my entire life around systems, decisions, outcomes, things that can be measured, predicted, optimized. But none of that prepared me for what happens when a person enters your thoughts without permission and refuses to leave quietly. That's what you've done to me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. Like a thought that returns at the exact moment you're trying to focus on something else. And at first I ignored it, because that's what people like me do. We label it distraction. We categorize it as temporary emotional noise. We assume it will pass. But it didn't pass. It adapted. It learned me. And that is where things become complicated. Because I don't fall easily into uncertainty. I don't let people rearrange my internal structure without resistance. And yet here I am, speaking to you in a tone I don't usually use for anyone. Let me ask you something that I don't ask lightly. When was the last time someone made you feel like your presence had consequences? Not convenience, not attention, consequences. Because that is what you are to me now. And I don't mean that in a dramatic sense, I mean it in a structural sense. Like something in my thinking has been reconfigured without my consent. And I'm still trying to understand whether that is dangerous or necessary. You might think this is about attraction. It's not that simple. Attraction is predictable. It follows patterns. It fades when interrupted. What I am talking about does not behave like that. It behaves like recognition. Like something in me responded to something in you before language was even involved. And I know how that sounds. I know how easily people dismiss this kind of language. But I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to stay honest with yourself while you listen, because I think you felt it too, even if you didn't name it, even if you tried to ignore it. There are moments when silence between two people is not empty. It is full of unsaid alignment, and I think we both stepped into one of those moments without realizing it. But here is where I need to slow this down, because I am not offering you fantasy. I am offering you something far more dangerous, clarity. And clarity, once it enters a relationship between two people, removes innocence from everything that follows. You don't get to pretend anymore. You don't get to hide behind confusion. And most people avoid that their entire lives. But I didn't come here to avoid it. I came here to face it, and I came here with you in mind. Now I want you to imagine something. Imagine someone looks at your life, not the version you present to the world, but the version you keep quiet. And instead of stepping back, they step closer. Not to fix you, not to judge you, but to understand what it would mean to stay. Most people don't do that. Most people evaluate you. They categorize you. They decide where you fit. But very few people are willing to sit in the uncertainty of another human being without trying to resolve them. And I think that is where you and I became dangerous to each other, because neither of us is easily resolved. And I should probably stop this here. This is the part where logic would tell me to slow down, to re-establish distance, to return to control. But control is not what I feel right now. What I feel is something more inconvenient, curiosity that doesn't fade when questioned, and that is not something I take lightly. Let me be honest with you in a way I haven't been with anyone in a long time. There is a version of me that believes this should end before it deepens. That version is loud sometimes. It speaks in logic. It speaks in caution. It speaks in outcomes and risks. But there is another version of me, quieter, more persistent. The one that doesn't think in terms of safety, but in terms of meaning. And that version is the one speaking to you right now, even though I know what it risks. Because here is the truth I haven't told you yet. Not fully, not directly. I haven't told you the real reason this feels irreversible. And I won't tell you yet. Not because I am hiding it from you, but because timing matters. And some truth truths destroy what they are meant to reveal if spoken too early. But I want you to feel something very specific right now. I am not offering you a fantasy version of connection. I am offering you something that requires presence, consistency, emotional honesty, and the willingness to be seen even when being seen is uncomfortable. So tell me something. If someone saw the parts of you that you usually edit before the world sees them, would you stay, or would you start preparing your exit quietly before they notice you're already leaving? Don't answer quickly, because your first answer is usually your defense mechanism. And I'm not trying to meet your defense mechanism. I'm trying to meet you. And I think somewhere in this moment, you already know that I am not speaking to the surface of you. I'm speaking to the part that recognizes when something unusual is happening, even if it doesn't know what to call it yet. And I want to stay in that space a little longer, before everything becomes too defined, too labeled, too safe again. Because once it becomes safe, we will both start pretending less is happening than actually is. And I am not ready to pretend, not yet, not with you, not when something inside me is still forming an answer I haven't fully understood. So I'll leave you here, not with closure, but with tension, because if this is going to continue, it should continue with honesty, not comfort. And I need to know one thing before I go further into this with you. There are moments in life when silence becomes heavier than truth, and I think we've reached one of those moments, because what I am about to say will not feel neutral to you. It will either pull you closer or make you question everything you felt before this point. And I need you to stay with me even when it becomes uncomfortable. Not because I need your attention, but because what is forming between us does not survive avoidance. It only survives presence. I've been thinking about you in ways I didn't plan for. Not in the romantic sense people assume, but in the structural sense. Like you started occupying a part of my internal world I did not assign to anyone. And that should have alarmed me. It did, at first. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was a distraction from pressure, from responsibility, from everything that demands precision in my life. But the strange thing about you is, you didn't fade when I tried to reduce you to logic. You stayed, not as a thought, but as a presence. And that is where everything becomes complicated. Because presence is harder to dismiss than emotion. Emotion can be explained away. Presence cannot. Presence interrupts you. It lingers when everything else shuts off. And I started noticing something I couldn't ignore anymore. You changed the way I interpret stillness. Before you, silence was neutral. Now silence feels like waiting. And I don't know when that shift happened, but I know I can't unfeel it. I should tell you something important now, something I delayed earlier, because there is a truth behind all of this that I haven't fully exposed yet, and I need you to hear it without rushing to conclusions. I'm not offering you attention. I'm not offering you validation. And I am not offering you admiration. I'm offering you risk. Because that is what this is becoming. A risk I didn't schedule. A risk I didn't plan for. A risk that doesn't behave like other risks I've taken in my life. And I want to be honest about something else too. There is a part of me that is afraid of you, not because you are dangerous, but because you are unfamiliar in a way that feels emotionally irreversible. Do you know what that means? It means I can imagine a version of my life where you don't exist, but I can no longer feel that version as complete. And that realization should have made me step back. Instead, it made me look closer. And that is where I started losing my internal certainty. Because I built my life on certainty, on knowing where things lead, on understanding consequences before they arrive. But you don't behave like something that can be predicted. You behave like something that changes meaning over time. And I need to ask you something carefully now. When someone sees you in a way that feels too deep, do you feel comfort, or do you feel the urge to disappear? Because I've started noticing something troubling inside myself. Every time I get closer to understanding you, I also start feeling the possibility of losing you more intensely. And that combination is dangerous, because it creates attachment without permission. And I don't want to force anything onto you that you didn't choose. But I also cannot pretend that I am unaffected. There is a moment I need to tell you about. It happened quietly. No dramatic event, no obvious turning point, just a realization that arrived too late to ignore. I found myself checking for you in moments you weren't present, not physically, but mentally, like my mind had started expecting your presence in places you never agreed to occupy. And that is where I stopped feeling in control. Because control is not about decisions, it is about predictability, and you disrupted that. There is something else too, something more difficult to admit. There are other possibilities in my life, other directions, other people who make sense on paper, people who fit. People who don't destabilize everything internally. And yet, none of them create the same internal conflict you do. And that is where I started asking myself a question I didn't want to ask. Am I choosing what is right, or am I being pulled towards something I don't yet understand? And I still don't have an answer, but I am closer to the edge of that question than I expected to be. And here is where things shift. because I think you are also feeling this instability, even if you haven't said it, even if you are trying to maintain distance. There is a part of you that recognizes the intensity of what is forming here. And I want to ask you something honestly. If I stopped speaking to you after this moment, would you feel relief or loss? Don't answer quickly, because the truth is not always what you say first. It is what you feel after you finish denying it. And I need to be honest about something that is going to change the emotional weight of everything I've said so far. I haven't been fully truthful about why this feels like an opportunity. Not because I intended to mislead you, but because I was protecting something inside myself from being exposed too early. But I can't delay it forever, so I'll say it in a way that is not complete yet. There is a reason this feels irreversible to me, a reason I haven't fully articulated, and it has nothing to do with timing and everything to do with recognition. Because somewhere in all of this, I stopped feeling like I was meeting someone new and started feeling like I was remembering someone I was not supposed to forget. And that is the point where everything becomes emotionally unstable, because memory that has no origin creates confusion that feels like destiny. But I still don't know what it is, and I refuse to invent certainty where there is none. But I cannot deny the intensity of it either, and now I feel something shifting between us. A tension that is no longer just curiosity, it is expectation. And expectation changes everything. It makes silence heavier, it makes distance meaningful, it makes absence feel like decision. And I can feel myself standing at a point where I either step forward or disappear completely from this emotional space before it becomes irreversible. And I need you to understand what that means. If I step forward, I don't know how I return to who I was before this. And if I step back, I don't know what part of me I lose in the process. So I'm asking you something not as a performance, but as a private truth between two people who are no longer unaffected. If I chose to continue this, would you be able to meet me where honesty becomes heavier than comfort? Or would you prefer I stay where things are still safely undefined? Because whatever happens next will not stay soft for long. And I need to know if you are still here with me in this uncertainty, or already preparing to leave it behind. And I'll stop here, right before the moment this becomes something neither of us can easily reverse. There comes a point in every human connection where pretending stops being possible. Not because people decide to be honest, but because silence becomes too expensive to maintain. And I think we've arrived there. I can feel it in the weight of everything unsaid between us. It is no longer light curiosity. It is no longer emotional uncertainty. It is something heavier. Something that starts influencing decisions even when no decision has been made yet. And I need you to stay with me through this final stretch of honesty, because this is where everything either collapses or becomes real enough to survive truth. I have been careful with you, more careful than I intended to be, because I knew from the beginning that if I let this become too real in my own mind, I would lose the ability to walk away cleanly. And I don't know if that was wisdom or avoidance, but I can no longer maintain distance from what I already feel forming between us. And I need to say something clearly now, not as metaphor, not as suggestion, but as truth. You are not just someone I think about. You are someone who has started altering how I experience absence, and that is not something I take lightly. Because absence used to mean nothing. Now absence feels like unfinished communication. And that change did not come from logic, it came from you. There was a part of me that resisted this for a long time. That part still exists. It keeps trying to remind me of everything I should prioritize over this feeling. Stability, predictability, safety. But the problem with those words is that none of them explain what happens when a person becomes emotionally embedded in your internal world without permission. And that is what you've become. Not a decision, not a preference, something closer to a presence I didn't negotiate with. And I want to be honest with you about something that will change how you understand everything I've said so far. I tried to replace this feeling, not because I wanted to forget you, but because I wanted to prove to myself that you were optional. And I couldn't, not in the way I expected, because every alternative felt like comparison, and you don't compare to presence. Presence either exists or it doesn't, and you exist, in a way I can't rationalize away anymore. There's something else I need to tell you now, something that I delayed too long. I said earlier that I haven't told you the real reason. That was true, but not anymore. Because if I don't tell you now, this becomes avoidance instead of truth. The real reason this feels irreversible is not because of intensity alone. It is because you made me confront a version of myself I usually don't allow access to anyone. A version that does not operate on control. A version that does not calculate outcomes before feeling them. A version that simply responds. And I have spent a long time trying to silence that version. But you didn't silence it. You activated it. And now I don't know how to pretend it was never there. There were moments I almost stepped away from this completely. Moments where I told myself, this is too unstable, too uncertain, too emotionally unstructured. And I even considered choosing something else, something easier, something predictable, something that would not demand emotional risk. But every time I tried to move away from you mentally, I found myself returning, not out of habit, but out of something closer to recognition. And I don't trust recognition easily, because recognition without history feels like illusion. And yet it persists. And now I am standing in a place I did not plan to reach, a place where I can no longer pretend neutrality. So I need to ask you something with complete honesty. If I told you I was choosing you emotionally, not fully understanding why yet, would you trust the honesty of that choice, or would you question its stability? Because I am not offering you certainty, I am offering you truth in its most unorganized form, and I understand the risk of that. There is a possibility I'm wrong about all of this. There is a possibility this is emotional projection. There is a possibility this dissolves with time, and I am willing to accept that. But I am not willing to pretend I feel nothing just to remain safe, because what I feel is no longer neutral, and I can no longer treat it like it is. And I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine two people standing at the edge of something they cannot fully name yet. Not love in the traditional sense, not attachment in the conventional sense, but something forming in real time through awareness, honesty, and emotional exposure. And imagine both of them know that stepping forward will change everything, and stepping back will not restore what existed before. That is where we are, not in certainty, not in completion, but in irreversible awareness. And I need to be transparent about something that might feel uncomfortable. If you choose to leave this here, I will understand. But I will not return to who I was before this, because once you see a certain kind of emotional truth in another person, you cannot unsee it. And I think you already know that about me too, even if you haven't said it, even if you are still deciding what to believe. There is a part of you that already feels this is not ordinary, and I am speaking directly to that part now. Not the cautious part, not the defensive part. The part that recognizes when something is quietly shifting direction. Because I think you are also standing at a threshold, whether you admit it or not. And I need you to understand something before we end this moment. This is not an attempt to convince you. This is not persuasion. This is exposure of everything I could no longer keep contained. And I don't want you to respond immediately. I want you to feel the weight of what it means that this exists between us now. Because it changes what silence means. It changes what distance means. It changes what not choosing means. And I will say something now that I should have said earlier. If this is an opportunity, then it is not one that repeats. Not because of external timing, but because emotional alignment like this does not return in the same form once it is ignored. And I am not saying that to pressure you. I am saying that because I believe honesty should not be softened when it matters most. So I will leave you here, at the exact point where clarity begins to feel irreversible. And I will not follow this with anything else, because anything after this would only dilute what has already been